The next speaker, Lawrence Robinson.
Good evening, how you doing?
Good evening, sir.
My name is Gabriel. I came here today to talk to you about the African burial ground. I also came here today to talk to you about...
Sir, excuse me one second. Move that mic a little bit closer to you. There you go. That's good.
Yes, did you hear me? My name is Gabriel. I came here to talk to you about the African burial ground and the consequences of you not doing anything about it. There will be storms in Richmond and seismic activities if you do not, or if you refuse to move the asphalt off of that burial ground. I don't know if you believe in God. I don't know if you believe in prophets, but I am an individual that don't come around too often. I am a power that you must reckon with. And if you do not move the asphalt off of my ancestors, this city will shake. High velocity winds and turbo boosters will seize you. Consider yourself warned.
Thank you, sir.
The next speaker, King Salim Kalafani.
We're following breaking news right now out of Washington, D.C., where a magnitude 5.3 earthquake has been felt in the D.C. area. The Pentagon has been evacuated. We were just talking to Senator Coons of Delaware, who, like so many others right now, slightly shaken by the tremors that they felt. The senator telling me live that the ground literally shook beneath them. Andrea Mitchell, as you also well know, would normally be live during this hour. She's now on the phone as her show was interrupted as a result of this. Andrea, can you tell me what you're hearing and what was even felt at our D.C. bureau there?
Cameron, I've never felt anything like this. We're all safe. We're outside. We were on the air, as you know, and everything started shaking. The desk, the cameras, the floor, everything around me. And you know our studio on the third floor here of our building on Northwest D.C. It was shaking so demonstrably that my papers, my scripts, everything around me was just bouncing up and down. At first, I wasn't sure whether... It never occurs to you when you live in Washington that it's going to be an earthquake. And then people, our technical folks, started coming in and saying, it's an earthquake, get out of here. And they grabbed all of us, and we started going down, walking pretty fast down 3 flights of steps. We're all now outside, a couple hundred people from the Washington Bureau here in Washington, D.C., having experienced, I think, our first earthquake. We're told it was 5.8. I guess that will be clarified later as they begin to make measurements.
That's what we're hearing as well. Well, Andrea, I'm also getting word. I'm getting word that there are people who are in North Manhattan who are also saying that they felt something there as well. So all of these details are coming in to us. But 5.8 magnitude, Andrea. I'm not sure if you even heard our interview with Senator Coons, who was originally on to talk about the breaking news out of Libya, and certainly had to switch gears and tell us what was happening there. He heard sirens on the Capitol. There was an evacuation, at least toward the end of our information. But what's going on there, Andrea?
Well, at this stage, we are all outside. We've all been cleared from the building. Everyone here is safe. We don't know of any injuries reported anywhere else in the immediate area. And I think that given what has been experienced elsewhere in earthquakes on the West Coast and elsewhere throughout the region, we've seen, the devastating earthquakes. This was not damage. I don't see any cracks in the building. We certainly didn't see anything coming down. It was just a noticeable shaking, I would say, lasted probably upwards of a minute, maybe no more than that. And it took a while for many of us, especially when you're doing a show and you're focused so much on live interviews. I was just finishing my conversation with you on the job fair down in Miami and preparing to talk to other guests and wrap up the show. So we've had a lot of breaking news today out of Libya, and we were focused so heavily on all the developments there. It just didn't register for a while that this could possibly be an earthquake. Something I've lived here now for 40 years. I've never experienced anything like that in Washington.
Well, I got an email just from Willie Geis, our colleague, and he said he felt it in New York. His walls in his apartment shook for about 5 to 7 seconds, no damage and nothing since. But I believe Willie is near the west side of Manhattan, and he is emailing me saying that he felt the tremors there. The USGS map shows that the earthquake centered near Charlottesville, Virginia. That's what they believe. I'm also getting information that Capitol Police are evacuating the U.S. Capitol, which we got the heads up from Senator Coons that this was happening. The U.S. Capitol building has been evacuated after the tremor violently shook the building. Light fixtures were swinging, and the building shook, according to this report, for about 15 seconds while the tremor hit. 15 seconds in a quake is a lifetime, especially when you're in a part of the country that is not prepared for it, and certainly you're not expecting anything of this nature. I also got this in from Jim Miklashevsky. He's saying that his wife and son, they're in northern Montgomery County, said that the earthquake lasted at least 1 minute. That's what it felt like to them there, and they could not stand on the floor. It is the same area which was the closest to the epicenter in the quake that happened about a year ago. So these are some of the details that I'm getting in just from our colleagues, Andrea, in the area, people who are in Manhattan, like Willie Geis and Jim Miklashevsky's family, who apparently they're near where the epicenter of last year's quake, which I'm working to get all of the details on this. But I'm hearing repeatedly mild tremor, but extremely violent. And at least in the Capitol, there were chandeliers and light fixtures, I should say, affected by the tremor itself. So hopefully no injuries here, but we're still waiting to get some more details. So, Andrew, what are they telling you at our bureau there?
Well, everyone here is outside, but let me just restate that in terms of where the leaders of the country are, we know the president is in Martha's Vineyard. The Secretary of State is in New York City, at last report. Leon Panetta is in Monterey. She was giving several speeches today, and was the Defense Secretary, of course, is very near his home out there in Carmel Valley, California. The Vice President was in Mongolia and is going to be on his way back from Asia, but that's where the Vice President is. Most of the leaders, the Speaker of the House and the others, are in their home districts or on congressional tours or on vacation. So this is a downtime in Washington, but there's no question about national leadership in terms of where everyone else is today. Very few people in
Andrea,
in the
you mentioned Martha's Vineyard, Andrea. I just got this hot note in that they felt a tremor in the press workspace in Martha's Vineyard. So now we have a great portion of the East Coast where people are reporting that they felt these tremors. And, you know, I'm standing not very far from Congresswoman Maxine Waters. As you mentioned, everyone is kind of spread out. You've got members of the Congressional Black Caucus here in Miami with this, and they're all, like the rest of us, kind of baffled by the news coming from Washington and the area, but also trying to clamor to get more details. But we also have a picture of the National Mall. This is where people are being evacuated. And I believe I've got Pete Williams on the ready to talk about the information he's been able to gather with all that's going on. Pete, are you there?
I am, Tamron. So far, we've not heard of any serious damage here in the Washington, D.C. area. This earthquake was centered to the south of us in Virginia, near Charlottesville, Virginia, which is where the University of Virginia is. We haven't heard yet from university officials about whether there's any danger there. We're actually in a part here in Washington, D.C., where NBC News is. We're right next door to the Department of Homeland Security in northwest Washington. It's sort of a high point of the city, and several DHS employees are outside their building as well. I just talked to one of them on a cell phone who said they were ordered outside their buildings. They're in an old U.S. Navy facility that was hastily converted to the offices of Homeland. They say they haven't heard of any damage, and the response around town has varied. I just talked to some folks at the U.S. Supreme Court. They were not evacuated. The justices aren't around in the summer, but a lot of staff is there. The Capitol was, the people in parts of the Pentagon were, other federal agencies, it seems to vary, but so far we have not heard of any reports of damage. But as you say, it's so unusual here. My colleague Kelly O'Donnell, who spent many years living in Los Angeles, you know, it was nothing to her. It was no doubt that it was an earthquake to her. But for many of us who have lived in Washington for decades, this is not something that we're used to feeling here. It started out very gently. We could feel feel our building rumbling. It was as though you were in an area where a freight train was passing by, is the only feel I can come to it. And then it became pretty clear that it was an earthquake. And I have to admit to you, I did briefly dive under my desk, having seen all those public service announcements about what to do.
You did the right thing.
I did briefly dive under my desk, and then when it was pretty clear that it was over, we started working the phones. But so far, no reports of damage here in the D.C. area.
About 8 o'clock. It's like mothership supercell. Never seen this in Virginia before. Oh my God, this is amazing. Probably a tornado in that thing. Wow. Wow. This is just like in the plains. Tornado crossing the road. There it goes. Tornado. There it is. Tornado's crossing the road there. Power flashes. There it goes. You can hear it. Oh my God. Oh my God. There it is. Big tornado. Oh my God. Please don't do any damage. Oh my God. Please go away. Oh my God, that's a big tornado.
All right, Craig, thank you. Now let me go to Lester Holt. I understand Lester is in Midtown Manhattan, in the center of the city. Lester, what are you seeing there?
Well, actually, I just came back from downtown Manhattan. I was actually at Ground Zero shooting a story at the new memorial. So it's a construction site and didn't feel it. Came outside and noticed people standing around buildings. And then as we've been making our way back to Midtown here in the vehicle, outside a lot of high-rise buildings downtown, office workers who had been evacuated either by force or are on their own, standing outside. We passed what appeared to be a daycare center of some sort where there were, they had actually taken cribs out on the street with the children. The workers were caring for the children.
I am a power that you must reckon with. And if you do not move the asphalt off of my ancestors, this city will shake. High velocity winds and turbo boosters will seize you. Consider yourself warned.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Scott Pelley reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York. We are interrupting the programming this afternoon because of a rather unusual event. There has been an earthquake along the eastern coast of the United States, an earthquake that has been felt from Virginia all the way up to Massachusetts. The U.S. Capitol building and the Pentagon were evacuated for a time. We have Chip Reed, our CBS News correspondent at the Pentagon. Chip, what did you feel down there?
Well, Scott, we felt about 10 seconds of fairly violent shaking, and as you can imagine at the Pentagon, when something like that happens, the immediate assumption, or at least the immediate fear, was that it might have been a bomb. Immediately, people started running out of the Pentagon. We very quickly started getting calls from other people saying that there had been shaking quite a distance from here. I got a call from Potomac, Maryland, that said there had been shaking out there. Our bureau in Washington, we then very quickly concluded that this had to be an earthquake and not a bomb, so people calmed down a bit. But the Pentagon is still checking to make sure that everything is stable and that there are no problems with the building after that fairly violent shaking. And as you can imagine, the Pentagon is one of the most solidly built buildings in the world. If it shook like that here, I can imagine what it was like in other places. Scott?
So why is the house shaking? Okay, this is an earthquake. Okay. I think we just had an earthquake in Virginia. That was crazy.
I am a power that you must reckon with. And if you do not move the asphalt off of my ancestors, this city will shake.
Yeah, it's like, what the heck, you know? In the world? What the? Hold on. So around 150 something, it just happened. And yeah, everything just shook. I thought there was a train coming, a plane coming or something. You know, it was just like a sonic feeling, like a rumble, like a thunder, like a long continuous thunder. The power went out. I got my computers are hooked up on a UPS. It's a power supply. It's a backup system, and that's only good for probably about 20 minutes or so. So I'm gonna have to like close everything out. But man, okay. So I make a vlog, and right in the middle of my vlog, an earthquake happens. I mean, how often does something like this ever happen? I mean, just post a comment or a video response below. Let me know what you think about that. I mean, where I live, it's not common for earthquakes. Okay, this is something you get maybe in California, but not down here on the East Coast. You know, forget about it. This is nuts.
As you heard, my name is Gabriel. I came here to talk to you about the African burial ground and the consequences of you not doing anything about it. There will be storms in Richmond and seismic activities if you do not, or if you refuse to move the asphalt off of that burial ground.
All right, power's on. Well, here's the update. Look on the computer. This is I'm sure this confirms what I thought was an earthquake. And that shows about the time it really happened. So, Mamma mia is all I got to say.
We had just arrived on the Amtrak train when suddenly the train station began to rumble like we hadn't felt or seen before. Millions of Americans feeling and fearing the same thing at that moment, obviously with the 10th anniversary of 9/11 approaching. And this morning here, we're getting a clearer picture of the damage, that crack at the top of the Washington Monument. The estimated 5.8 quake drove thousands from office buildings and train stations, even damaged national treasures, creating that crack in the Washington Monument's capstone. Near the epicenter in Mineral, Virginia, supermarket surveillance video captured the moment. The White House shook. And at the National Cathedral in Washington, damage to 3 of the 4 pinnacles atop the tower. The quake interrupts this commercial being taped in Virginia.
Just thought we'd take this opportunity to show you our new customer waiting room. Hey, you feel that?
And in New York, as the DA was holding a press conference, you could see it in his face.
No, okay. I've been through earthquakes in Seattle.
His colleagues racing to leave the platform.
911 operators were overwhelmed by frightened callers.
I need you to calm down for me, okay? Okay, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
We were on board an Amtrak train to D.C. when suddenly Union Station, the train station, started shaking violently. Officers yelling to us and to passengers to get out. So many workers from Washington to New York had that same feeling in their gut, just weeks now before this country marks 10 years since 9/11.
The ground started shaking and people started screaming and running around.
It's scary when you're all the way up there, you know, on the 14th floor. It's not easy.
The most powerful East Coast earthquake in nearly 7 decades left its mark.
Back at the damaged Washington Monument, the Cross family was at the top. They say they felt the monument sway nearly a foot.
There's a lot of chaos, a lot of people yelling, some screaming.
They said they felt pieces of the monument falling on them.
And most interesting, the lemurs at the National Zoo began alarm calling a full 15 minutes before the quake hit. Sounding the alarm, in fact. Here in Washington this morning, some of the public schools are closed and some of the national monuments as well for inspection. So if you're here traveling with your family, do call ahead. Robin, I got to tell you, deep in that Union Station, the train station down below, when it started to rumble and people were yelling terror, bomb, and screaming, a real sense of just how frightening this was for so many Americans for a time. And I've got to tell you how many people came up to me and said they were relieved this was just an earthquake. When have you heard that before?
Rarely do you hear that. A lot of rattled nerves. Okay, David, thank you.
I am a power that you must reckon with. And if you do not move the asphalt off of my ancestors, this city will high velocity winds and turbo boosters will seize you. Consider yourself warned.
And it looks like it's...
Oh my God, it's totally rotating right here.
Like it's
Look at this.
Of our building.
I wonder if you can see this.
Here, like the soccer fields and all that.
I don't feel like my camera's getting it, but this is a total circle right here.
But
there is going to be.
like,
I'm freaking out. It
looks.
This is coming down. You can see the middle of it starting to come down. Over there. That's it. Oh my God! Look at my camera.
Oh my God.
I'm shaking. That is it. That's it. There it is. Oh my God! There it is.
It's like, oh my God.
Oh my God! I've never seen anything like this in my life.
We're following breaking news right now out of Washington, D.C., where a magnitude 5.3 earthquake has been felt in the D.C. area. The Pentagon has been evacuated. We were just talking to Senator Coons of Delaware, who, like so many others right now, slightly shaken by the tremors that they felt. The senator telling me live that the ground literally shook beneath him. Andrea Mitchell, as you also well know, would normally be live during this hour. She's now on the phone as her show was interrupted as a result of this. Andrea, can you tell me what you're hearing and what was even felt at our D.C. bureau there?
Cameron, I've never felt anything like this. We're all safe. We're outside. We were on the air, as you know, and everything started shaking. The desk, the cameras, the floor, everything around me. And you know our studio on the third floor here of our building on Northwest D.C. It was shaking so demonstrably that my papers, my scripts, everything around me was just bouncing up and down.
Consider yourself warned.